Welcome to, or welcome back to, the Agatha May Detective Agency. I'm Agatha May, and in this video, we'll be looking at the timeline around Mica Francis's involuntary commitment to South Strand Hospital. In the video about the Waccamaw Center for Mental Health, I didn't explain the commitment very clearly. Waccamaw was the facility who instigated the commitment, but Mica was admitted to South Strand Hospital. I've been looking over all the screenshots, documents, and photos that I have in this case, and have been trying to piece together what was happening in February that made John Paul so determined to have Mica committed. I came across a text message that he had sent to DJ the day after Mica was admitted to the hospital. You know DJ, the guy who's way cuter and just all around better than John Paul? Yeah, that DJ. Before we get to that text, let's back up and make a timeline of the few days before Mica was committed. I've looked at the texts that John Paul attached to his affidavit, and most of them aren't dated, so it was a bit confusing at first to get them in the correct order, but I think I have them pretty close. There are screenshots that show Mica's message on the right of the screen, so they had to have been taken from her phone. I've concluded that these screenshots were made after John Paul went to the hospital and took her belongings. He took her phone on the 7th and was taking screenshots by 4:07 that afternoon. So if the screenshot shows the text from Mica to her family as having been sent yesterday, the text had to have been sent on the 6th, and John Paul took the screenshot on the 7th. That's the only way the text could be from yesterday. I hope that makes sense. Did John Paul have her committed because he was worried about something she might have had on her phone? He seems to have grabbed it and started taking screenshots very quickly. He kinda has a thing about screenshots, though. I wonder how many he actually has. Maybe 350. According to John Paul's timeline, sometime between January 29th and February 5th, Mica texted her brother Nate. John Paul was trying to point out in the affidavit that she had texted Nate to say how supportive John Paul was. This is the text that I've talked about where Mica also said they were going to Waccamaw Mental Health on Monday to confront the head nurse. February 5th was a Monday, and that to me is way more interesting than whatever she said about John Paul. What was the confrontation going to entail, and more importantly, what would it uncover? On February 5th, 2024, Mica sent a text to her father Michael and to Nate. Please communicate in this app if y'all want to talk to each other so that we are all on the same page and not just to me if it's about my mental health and well-being. John Paul takes care of me day to day, and I always want to make sure he's in the loop, and he will do the same. Nate responded with a very nice reply, and John Paul ranted, and then he said he had Michael blocked. And part of his rant that stood out to me was, anyone who tells someone not to take their meds that the doctor said to take is going to pay any legal or medical bills that occur from Mica not taking meds. What legal bills was he thinking of when he wrote that? Was he alluding to his ridiculous statement that if she didn't take her meds, she was threatening to ice someone every day? Or was it about something else? Something happened between that text and the commitment papers. I can't find any confirmation that she went to Waccamaw to confront anyone. So what was it? The following are the events of February 6th, 2024. The involuntary commitment papers were stamped by the probate court at 12:33 p.m. At 1:34 p.m., Nate sends Mica a screenshot of a text that John Paul had sent him about Mica being involuntarily committed. John Paul rants again. Mica messages back to the group that the police aren't going to come to her house. She also calls it the church's house. So it appears that she knew that the church had purchased the house the December prior. I'm wondering if she'd only recently found out about it, though. At 5:27 p.m., Michael texted Mica and suggested she leave the county until the 72-hour pickup order expires. At 6:47 p.m., John Paul called the police to give Mica's location. He knew her location because he was tracking it through her phone. At an unknown time, there was a family text, and one of Mica's sisters wrote this to John Paul. You saw me yesterday twice and didn't say anything, and now she's having a breakdown and not coming home? Why won't she go home?" At 7:49 p.m., John Paul texted Mica's family and wrote, "Just so everyone knows, her doctor said it could get incredibly worse." Mica's sister Abby wrote back, "What will get worse? She was fine yesterday." Then John Paul claims that she's having a bipolar and schizophrenic breakdown, which isn't even a real thing. The problem with him thinking he's always the smartest person in the room is that he's not, and some people know more about mental health than he does. He couldn't even be bothered to research it either, because he is so sure of everything he says, and that cockiness is going to be the downfall of his scrawny self. Here are the events of February 7th, 2024. At 3:27 a.m., Mica makes a call to the police about family members of John Paul staying at her house and about her laptop. She was at the Buc-ee's in Florence, South Carolina when she made that call. I think the family member she referred to was John Paul's sister Lacey. There has been talk about Mica and Lacey not getting along. I came across another text that Mica sent John Paul, and I think she sent this while she was waiting for the commitment pickup order to expire. In the text, she wrote, "Text me back your full name according to your birth certificate when you have received, read, and understood my terms, with a picture of your birth certificate. One more thing that I forgot to add, and this should be it, but it's a big one and non-negotiable, because I only have apparently less than 48 hours, and I don't know how much time you have, but that's how much time I have, so I will wait. I'd like a copy, signed and notarized, by all the trustees, members, CEOs, bishops, apostles, pastors, evangelists, teachers, accountants of our church bylaws, that they've read them and understand who the authority is that they are under, and what power that authority has over Solid Rock Ministries Incorporated, Solid Rock at Market Common, God's house. Who is the First Lady? What happens if the pastor dies? Who is in command? If that person dies, who is in command? If that person is, and I think the last line is incapacitated, so if that person is incapacitated, who is in command?" She was committed to South Strand Hospital sometime before 4 p.m. on February 7th. The reason I think this text was sent prior to Mica's commitment is because on her medical records from the hospital stay, there's a note that upon admission she was talking about the paper trail. I think her mention of less than 48 hours could have been about the time remaining before the commitment pickup order expired. I don't know why she was asking for John Paul's birth certificate. Was she actually concerned about his identity, or was she needing it for some other reason? I think the request for the signed bylaws have to do with something she discovered about the church. I wonder what her other terms were that she referred to. Another note on her medical records was that Mica was talking about her brother, the power of attorney, and her sister-in-law. There was also something about out of my charity. Whatever preceded that was not included in the screenshot, perhaps by design. And now we get to the text that John Paul sent to DJ, who, once again, is way cuter than John Paul, and he probably smells better too. John Paul texted DJ on February 8th at 12:43 p.m., and he wrote, "Hey man, Mica's doctor and I are trying to get a time frame of the manic episode. What did you and her talk about for 9 minutes on Tuesday at 6:15? Or what was she talking about? She's in the hospital, by the way." Well, that's not a weird way to ask about a phone call at all. Was John Paul worried about Mica and DJ at this point? Or was he worried about what Mica might have told DJ? Maybe it was both. I'm about 100% sure it had diddly squat to do with John Paul and the doctor trying to work out any kind of time frame, though. DJ answered, "Hey, she called me twice before I got out of Now Kids, so I called her back, and she was just going on about God's authority in our lives. It was very random and didn't fully make sense." And then, in response to the part about her being in the hospital, "Oh no, what happened?" John Paul replied, "Ugh. So it was part of the manic episode? What was she saying about authority? Her doctor sent the police to pick her up, take her to hospital." Well, look at John Paul pushing the manic episode narrative, thinking he is all slick. DJ answered, "She said she wanted to make sure that I remembered what Reverend, and then it's cut off. Since I love most types of puzzles, I decided to see if I could figure out what the cutoff sentence could be by going off the placements of the tops of the letters that are peeking out, and I think I've come up with it. I used a font that is similar to the font used on the iPhone. Here you can see that I've superimposed the font over the original text to show how similar they are. Then I came up with this as the last line. So the text would read, "She wanted to make sure I remembered what Reverend Randall told us in Kenya about her." I don't know why, but I think this text is important. I don't think Mica was manic. I think she had just discovered something big and was perhaps in a little bit of shock, and there was probably an adrenaline rush happening. I think that whatever she told DJ about what Charles Randall said in Kenya wasn't random. I think she wanted DJ to remember whatever it was. And DJ, if you're watching, I wouldn't be mad if you wanted to confirm if I'm right or not. What did Charles Randall tell them in Kenya? On Sunday, February 18th, John Paul sent a text to two of the church elders. "Hey, I have a gigantic favor for one or both of you." Redacted called Mica and talked for a while. She said that Mica sounded okay, but couldn't verbalize why she isn't home or at church, etc. She did say that Mica doesn't know where her phone is. Nor did Mica remember going to the hospital. Maybe Mica's just mad at me, I don't know. But before I commit her tomorrow, could one of you call her as an elder and ask questions to see if she's still out of her mind? Like, why did you take money out of the church account and close it? Why do you not want to come home? And if she says anything about a paper trail, tell her I have my birth certificate and marriage license. But please find out if she's still out of it or not. First off, Mica knew John Paul had her phone. This is just John Paul getting caught in another lie, because he's already shown screenshots of texts that were from Mica's phone. Plus, he added a PS to one of his idiotic emails and told her that she could come get her phone anytime. And there's a police report where Mica had called from the hospital to report that John Paul had taken her belongings. He specifically mentions the money taken from the Kenya account and the paper trail, and he sandwiches those mentions with implications that Mica was out of her mind. I think this was very purposely done to conflate the money and the paper trail as just being some crazy thought in Mica's crazy mind. Let's go back to the police report that Tricia Ross filed about that missing money. She didn't report it until March 13th, but stated that the theft happened on February 14th. But what about that partial note in Mica's medical records, "out of my charity"? She made that statement when she was first committed, which was February 7th. I think February 5th is when Mica discovered something hinky with the finances at the church. What if someone else had taken the money from the Kenya account? Maybe what preceded the "out of my charity" on her medical records was something like, "I discovered that someone was taking money out of my charity." And because of it being in her medical records, John Paul had to scramble to once again try to steer the narrative. So he came up with the story that Mica had stolen money from the Kenya fund. She was cleared of any charges, so the story John Paul started passing around was obviously not true. We've heard rumors that she reported the church to the IRS, and that Pastor Jumba has stated he never received any money from John Paul. It's also been said that John Paul's claimed that the mission funds go through Charles Randall before they go to Pastor Jumba. What is actually happening with that money? If the rumors are true, why does Charles Randall have to get the money first? Why can't Solid Rock Church just send the funds directly to Pastor Jumba? Are those who donate to Dare to Care able to look at the financial reports for the mission's accounts? Is there any transparency? Was Mica committed so John Paul could maintain his claim that she was in a manic state, and therefore people couldn't believe anything she said? John Paul was telling church members that if Mica called, not to talk to her. He said she needed to hit rock bottom. But is it possible, and maybe even probable, that in reality he just didn't want her to tell members what she'd discovered about the church? John Paul is extremely protective of Solid Rock Church. I think it's his most prized possession. If someone did anything he felt was a threat to the church, I wonder how far he would actually go to protect it. I'll give the usual disclaimer that anyone mentioned in this video is innocent until proven guilty. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment as this helps my channel grow. Until next time, stay safe and be happy.